they have to be alive to the risks as well as the opportunities. The risks being what sort of economic and trade policies will the president now follow through on? He's made it clear that he thinks tariffs are the most beautiful word in the English language. The question is whether he will now go for general tariffs or selective tariffs and use them as negotiating leverage, not just on economic issues or economic market access issues, but also on other policy issues, as we saw when he talked about using them against Canada and Mexico on immigration and on fentanyl and related issues. So we have to, I think, take him at his word that he's serious about this, but it also does create opportunities because he is serious through his executive orders in deregulating further the American economy, weakening antitrust laws potentially. And so I think he is really trying to encourage an investment revolution in America. And you would have seen from the announcements he made at Mar-a-Lago in the White House about investments in American business, in AI and all the rest of it, that he is very keen, I think, to be boosting the US as the place to do investment. So you'll see more and more of that in the period ahead. Particular sectors like energy, oil and gas, crypto will come in for particular attention. You've seen the way he's tried to ramp up AI in recent days. So plenty of risk because of the uncertainty about how people might be impacted by tariffs, but also plenty of opportunity with some of the industry sectors that now could come more to the fore under a Trump presidency.
Given the reaction we've seen on Wall Street to the emergence of the Chinese AI platform DeepSeek, can you see the US president doubling down on his recent $500 billion Stargate AI project?
What's happened on Wall Street recent hours was a reminder that the world does not stand still and it's not all in Donald Trump's court. The Chinese have made it clear that in a number of these high-tech areas, they're going to be investing very strongly. They want to get the lead in AI, in quantum, in many of these areas, which they see rightly as the foundations of future industries. And so the fact that we've had DeepSeek come back into the picture in a big way this way, its claims will be evaluated. We have to be careful about some of the claims they've made about how cheaply they can do things. But the point is, it's a reminder that the playing field is a lot more complex than just the US thinking it can dictate to the rest of the world. Other players, particularly in China, will want to invest and show that they can have technological leadership. And so this is creating a very interesting dynamic. I think you're right that it will push Donald Trump to double down further. It may also mean he may want to put more investment, tech and trade controls on dealing with China. And the question then for allies, partners, trading partners of the US like Australia will be whether he asks us and other countries to follow those controls as well.
Donald Trump has threatened to double taxes on foreign companies and expats operating and living in the US if their home country levies discriminatory taxes against American interests. Does the government's new digital platform Levy fall into that category?
Well, we have to. The truth is, we'd have to wait and see. But I think if you're any government, not just the Australian government, you would be now thinking twice about the impact policy decisions may have on relations with the US. And that's not to say that Australia should then not do what it believes to be in its interest. But what I'm saying is that the playing field has changed. We've got an American activist president who is willing to use American power to the full extent to enforce American interests as he sees them. And we have to take into account what that will mean in practice.
Is this a fight the Australian government should pursue?
Well, I don't think any Australian government wants to be in fights, particularly with our closest ally. But we do have to stand up for our national interest, and that means being very active in Washington in explaining why we're doing what we're doing, whether it's the age restrictions on social media, whether it's the news bargaining code and all the rest of it. I think we have to explain where we're coming from. But we have to recognise that under Donald Trump, who is very close to the tech bros, there may be some of them who seek to influence him to take a contrary position to the one Australia is putting, and we will just have to face up to that. That's just the playing field we're on now.
With the president pressing his strategy of America first and at the expense of long-standing fundamental relationships such as the one the US has had with Canada and the EU, how does a close ally such as Australia work out where it stands?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. First, on the trade and economic side, America has a trade surplus with Australia. It's not as if, in inverted commas, we're screwing them on trade. In fact, our economies are quite complementary, and that's something I think that we have to keep reminding the US, and that this creates opportunities for us to work together in areas like critical minerals, for example, which are very important, not just for decarbonisation going forward, but also for defence materials. The other thing we've got to do is keep reminding our new American interlocutors about the ways in which our security, our defence posture is essential to the US security and defence posture. We do things in Australia which are very central to American security in this part of the world. There should be a reminder, I think, to the Americans that their Indo-Pacific partners like Australia, Japan, Korea, the Philippines and others are very important contributors to the security of the US itself, so that America does not see it as America first and America only.
A number of prominent Australian business identities, including Gina Rinehart and Anthony Pratt, were invited to Mr Trump's inauguration. Who are the Australians within the president's inner circle?
Well, I don't know that there are many in his inner circle. He's certainly got his fans. You mentioned a couple of them, Gina Rinehart and Anthony Pratt. He's got a young guy, Phil Hancock, I think his name is, who's an advancer. He seems to be about the most senior person with an Australian sort of connection in his inner circle. Greg Norman is someone who's known the president a long time and someone to whom the president relates because of their mutual interest in golf. So it'd be people like Greg that we've had to rely on in the past, for example, to get President Trump's number when he first became president. So the then Australian Prime Minister could speak to him. One thing we're watching at the moment very closely is who President Trump will nominate to be America's ambassador to Australia. And of course, we would want to replicate a situation where it's someone who has the ear of the president in the way that Carolyn Kennedy had the ear of President Biden.
You mentioned a number of prominent Australians you referred to as fans of the president. Does the federal government need to leverage those connections to its advantage?
Look, a government uses whatever connections it thinks will be useful in a particular context, but the most important connections are the connections we have here in Washington through our embassy, through our ambassador, the connection between the president and our Australian Prime Minister, the connection between Penny Wong as Foreign Minister with her counterpart Marco Rubio, the connection that Richard Marles as Defence Minister will have with his counterpart Pete Hegseth. The important thing is that these ministerial and cabinet secretary level connections on top of the prime ministerial presidential connection are the really important ones for Australia. You can have all sorts of shadow players, but in the end it's the decision makers that have to get on with each other in the national interest. And I have no doubt that any Australian government, whatever political flavour, will do what it can to promote Australia's national interest and have as frictionless and as creative a relationship with their American counterparts.
Arthur Sinodinos, good to speak to you.
Thanks very much, Kirsten.